Welcome back to It Starts Now, the happy hour of finance and business. My name is Stanley, and on today's episode, I am so excited about this because I have somebody that is a serial entrepreneur, someone that really understands different markets and invested in several different markets. This is a great opportunity, so please welcome our guest, Darnell Joseph. Darnell, welcome to the game.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Listen, Darnell has such a lot of experience, especially when it comes to project management. You also have experience with reading contracts, like you're one of the specialists when it comes to that. You also had Airbnb, like 3 of them, I believe, right?
Two. Yep.
Two?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And on top of that, you turn your credit over into like
840
something. Yeah. So to me, those are credible leaps, man. But how did you do that? Before we begin, all right, introduce yourself, background, and profession.
Okay, Darnell Joseph. Background is parents are from the Caribbean. So I was born in '89. I grew up in Brownsville. As you can see, I'm nervous right now. Brownsville, New York. Went to Catholic school from a young kid. Graduated from Bishop Ford High School in Park Slope. Then went off to go to Penn State. Started in as an engineer, civil engineer. Didn't work out. It was a little bit too tough for me in the sense of like certain classes I just couldn't pass. I could pass physics with no calculator with the Regents. I could do math. It just some chemistry and some other classes just I couldn't get through. Changed my major to security and risk analysis, and the story begins from there. That degree helped me propel into all the businesses I am in today. Graduated with a security and risk analysis degree, focused in intelligence and analytical modeling. Started my first Airbnb in 2015, 2016. This is a couple years after I got my first house that I turned my credit around from ever since 7th grade. Seventh grade. My mom gave me a credit card and was like, don't go crazy with this. At the time, I was into RC cars, gas-powered RC cars, and she was just like, I'm tired of giving you money every single time to go buy a new part for your car. Here's a credit card. Don't go crazy. And then she would take it back every time I would go out or go to the store. When I went to college, she gave me the card and said, hey, don't go crazy.
Right.
And now after college, she found out, I was like, oh, what was all that money I used to give you every week or every month? I was like, I paid my credit card bill. I used to max out the credit card, swipe, pay it down, not eat like I'll eat like cricks and like ramen until I got sick one night. And I was just like, no more ramen after that. And I would pay off my credit card, and from doing that, my credit score was in and around the 600s. And by the time I graduated, I was sitting at about a 810 almost. Just because of that one credit card.
Who taught you that?
No one. No one taught me. It just Google searches and at the time, back in high school, you had Ask Jeeves, you had all these other platforms, Bing, and what's the other one that people was using? Yahoo Search. Right. So I just researched. Had the library at school. Just kept on trying to find other people who were talking about it, or just business books that expressed what the things you needed to do and where your credit needs to be. Like 80% is considered, anything over 80% is considered maxed out. Right. So once I found that out, okay, all right, can't go over 80%. Made an Excel document, and then I was just like, all right, this is what I'm gonna do. And to this day, I still use that same Excel document to manage my finances and manage my credit card stuff. Graduated, bought my first house a year after graduation. At that time, I was working anywhere from 14 to 16-hour days. And people were like, how did you do it? I was working 14 to 16-hour days. I said, that's how I started. Right. Because when I was in my last 2 years of college, I was able to pay for my last 2 years of college by driving from Pennsylvania to New York, 4 hours for about I would say half a semester. To pay for my college debt, and just live in general. And people was like, "Oh, you're crazy!" But at the time, my father was able to get me into a union that my grandfather was in, my father was in, local
Right,
147.
right.
Dangerous work, but it paid well if you knew if you knew what you were doing. And I had the intellect to stay safe and not get hurt. And I would just leave class on Wednesday night, drive over, take the bus, and then I would work because it was 3 shifts. So I work Thursday graveyard, Friday swing shift was 3 to 11, and then Saturday I'll come in and I'll work. The morning shift would be 7 to 3, and then I would jump in the car or jump on the bus and go right back to Penn State again and start all over again. And I did that for about a half a year. That helped me pay off my pay that last year, start saving up for the house. So by the time I graduated, it was like, all right, well, let me see if I can get a job in the market. That didn't work out, so I went back to the local. That was my home in the beginning, and I did that, day in and day out, working there, working at my cousin's real estate company, and just kept doing those jobs, which was bringing down. I was doing maybe like you could say about 14 to 16 hours a day, because I would work 8 a.m. to about 1, go in the city and work from 3 to 11 and do the swing shift. And what is considered as shaping, where you go and you don't know if you're going to work, but if they put you to work, then you're going to be gone most of the time. I did go to work from 3 to 11, and if I didn't, then I try to get on graveyard, which was the 11 to 7. Did that, got my first Airbnb, purchased it with my family. It was a condo out in Pennsylvania, not too far from main campus in University Park of Penn State. Did that for about 6 months, and then the condo board said, "Hey, you can't do Airbnb in this condo because it's against the rules."
Right.
No one told me that by buying a condo, certain regulations that came with it.
Yeah, I actually talked about that, where like a lot of people don't know that communities and condominiums, they have bylaws, and they have certain corporational agreements that they have to abide by, and that's part of the rules. And if you don't know it before you go in, then you fall victim, because you might get an Airbnb or you might get a certain property, but you can't, there's certain restrictions what you can do, and you got to fall within those guidelines.
Yes. And my limitation was you couldn't have short stays less than 30 days. At the time, I kind of was like, okay, well, I got the first letter. I was like, well, I'm already invested, so I'm just going to do this a little bit longer until I at least get into spring season where I can get renters, because I'm not going to have an empty space and I'm paying the mortgage.
Right.
So I did Airbnb up until the spring. Then I got like the 3rd letter, and I was like, well, I'm done now, because I did my Airbnb. Football season, Penn State is great. You can get anywhere from, before you start paying any of your bills, you're looking at anywhere from $1,000 to as much as $3,000 for a weekend, depending how put together your Airbnb. Mine's was a 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath, 3-story townhouse condo with a double car garage, stainless steel appliances, and it did have a tennis court and a pool on the premises. So I pretty much had everything needed to ask for the most amount of rent. And at that time, Airbnb was still new to the local population, because most people just paid the hotel $500 a night.
Right.
So did that for about 2 years. Then I got in, then I convinced me and my family to get into another property, which was a duplex. It needed work. Went in there, the bank owned it, and I was just like, they owned it for about a year, couldn't move it. And I was just like, it's wintertime. I was like, what's wrong here? Right. So come to find out, every time that they turn on the water, it would just leak everywhere, and people was just like, oh, this house is a lemon. They didn't want it. I was just like, leak? I'm not scared of water, because all my years of doing property management, my cousins, leaks could be patched, they could be fixed, but the house was pretty much done. So they were selling the property at about 118, and I told them, with the numbers that I was trying to get at the time was a 10% return or more. I said 90. Kept them going back and forth about 2-3 weeks, and eventually after about 2 weeks, they agreed at 90, and eventually put in about $20,000 into the property to uplift it, in terms of it had forced air, but it didn't have AC. It had heat forced air. Right. So I added gas to the property, to both sides, because of a duplex. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath on one side, 3-bedroom, 1 bath on the other side. And at the time, rent in that part of Pennsylvania next to Penn State was about $700 for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. So I charged accordingly for that. But now the units were self-contained. The tenants paid for their own heat, own hot water. They had gas, which is cheaper than electric, and they had AC. They didn't need to put window units in, and they had heat and AC. So everything was pretty much ready to go for them. So as how I looked at it is when you put an investment like that in a property, you should try and get it back in 5 years. And typically, at least in State College area of Center County in Pennsylvania, they raise rents 3 to 5% every year over year. So at 3%, you can get back your money if long as you do the necessary things. Now did that. But I still had the Airbnb itch. I wanted to do Airbnb. So got another property. This was further out from Penn State, but it was right off the exit when you're on 80. We discussed that, 80 going to Penn State. Because, you get off the GW and, you sit in that car 3 hours. 1 hour from, Jersey to Delaware Water Gap, and then from 309 to 161, So it's you get there, and to go to Penn State you go left, but to get to my Airbnb you go right. And it was a duplex. One side was empty, needed a lot of work, and the other side had tenants, that long-standing tenants. I left the tenants there, asked them if they needed anything over the years to upgrade different things, and purchased that. Had it as a 3-bedroom, 1-bath Airbnb. Did well, no complaints. But wintertime was just rough because the house was in, sat on like about an acre of land, 3/4 acre land, but other houses was far and wide. So like when it got really cold, it got really cold. So
it could get cold.
Yes, it can. And Center County is like in a bowl. Happy Valley, it's in a bowl. So literally you'll get great weather or you're going to get dumped with a lot of snow. It's night and day when it comes to certain things like that over there. Did that Airbnb, had that drumming up. Went into some analytics, like I told you, found out that adding another bedroom would increase my average daily revenue, and just my vacancy would lower. So changed over a dining, like an offset dining room on the first floor of the property, turned that into a bedroom. As soon as I did that, within a week or two of getting people to book, I was being filled more often than
cool. So now, we did touch on a few things, but you started to go into the 4-unit properties that you have. You did invest into within the neighborhood, in a bad neighborhood, that you weren't sure how it was going to turn out, and then you got the feedback from others. And like we discussed, hey, there's no such thing as a bad neighborhood. Things start to eventually turn around, right? So what was the outcome with that?
The outcome of that was I was able to renovate all the units, get in tenants, and I was able to change a lot of things in the property. It went from a 40% return to about a 15% return after I invested money in the property, but the property was producing all by itself. Expenses went down almost 30-40%. The oil bill used to be $3,000 for a year, and I got it changed over to gas, and it became a $600 bill throughout the year for gas. So I put a lot of value into the property. That property was able to sell for about $20,000 more than all in after everything. So my efforts didn't go unheard by the person who bought it.
Yeah. Listen, what I failed to mention, and I'm glad you touched on all the other properties that you have with the investment with Airbnb and things like that. But what I failed to mention is where we at right now. It's another investment that you have going on, which is For Purpose down in Brooklyn, which is a sports bar. As you can see, we have the game on, Penn State game on, and he's a fellow Penn State member. And then we have the crowd downstairs. So this is an interesting environment. And you're co-owner with this. And what made you transition from doing properties, managing tenants, and then decide to say, this business model will work best for me, or I can transition into the restaurant business?
Well, I always a conversation every year. I'll say every couple months I'll have a conversation with my accountant, and he always just said that you have a lot of potential. You have a lot of potential. You're gonna be. And I always ask him like, what can I do to change my numbers or figure out to make more? Because the properties are finite. You could only make the X amount a month, X amount a year, and your deductions are X. And I felt I was pigeonholing myself, and I felt as though I should have been doing more. So constant conversations with the accountant, and just trying to figure out what was the next business idea that wouldn't be fine, that wouldn't have a ceiling to it. I had been talking to one of my brother's friends from high school. We all went to high school with each other, Bishop Ford in Park Slope, and we literally constant conversations about the restaurant industry and the bar and the scene and how what the numbers were and just different things. And I kind of said, all right, well, let me see about putting a team together, because everyone talks about having a team, putting a team together that helps you figure out that next level of things that people are now looking at. So I got everybody together, and this space that we're in on the second floor, which we use as event space as well as excess eating and drinking space, was an empty shell. This whole entire building was condemned for about 2 or 3 years before we end up signing the lease with the landlord. They basically gave us a vanilla box in a sense, where we had full reign of customizations and getting the place to be what we needed it to look like and look and feel. Nobody else on my team has ever did a build out like this. I've done full gut renovations, and I wasn't afraid. My team was afraid of something like this, and I was like, it'll come together. It doesn't look like anything, but it'll come together slowly but surely. You just have to throw paint on the wall. If it doesn't work, we'll just change it. If that's something that doesn't work, you'll just change it. We have the ability to change things at a moment's notice.
Right.
While big corporations, it's hard to change the ship in different directions because they have to get approval from this person. They have to do this aesthetic, that. There's a constant thing.
There's a chain of command that you got to go through.
Yes.
But were you able to do that because you had a certain amount of concession? Like, how long did they give you? They gave you to actually renovate and operate the place.
So the landlord gave us 6 months concession to renovate the place, but then COVID hit. We also was going through a moratorium with gas with National Grid. Cuomo was in a problem with National Grid, and they weren't trying to give us gas, so we had to have everything as electric, and then we had to convert it back over with the architect to gas. It was just a back and forth. So the landlord kind of was stuck in a way that they couldn't really say, all right, well, we're open, because we couldn't open our doors. We couldn't even get past the inspection phase. So that concession ended up turning into a year concession, and then when we got our liquor license July 2nd of 2020, kind of was like, all right, we got to open. And then I had got a phone call about a fire sale for a club that was going out of business in Williamsburg. Went over there, bought a lot of their items that made us open up a couple days later, July 5th of 2020. And it kind of was like the pieces made sense. Like anytime we got a problem, it was like, okay, what's the answer? Who do we need to talk to? What politician we need to get a hold of? We didn't take a roadblock as it's over. It's more about, all right, how do we pivot? We're constantly pivoting throughout the whole situation. And we just never gave up to try and open up. And we are here today, almost a year and a couple months later. We're showcasing the Penn State event today. We are one of the official Penn State bar and restaurants in New York, the only one in Brooklyn. We are also New York City Sports Football Club. We are one of their pub partners, trying to ink more relationships with other institutions throughout New York and just be a staple in the community.
That's awesome, man. Listen, for the people that really didn't understand what concession is mostly like a period of time that the landlord gives you to renovate without paying for it. So you're not paying on the property, but you're still there renovating and developing, because at the end of the day, they have to give you at least enough time to build out the project the way you would like, so that way you could be able to operate and have everything going smoothly, right?
Yes.
So now that we touched on the property, now let me tell you something. I don't take notes, and I'll share this with everybody in you. I don't take notes, but today I did bring notes because every conversation we had hit me. Right? When I say it hit me, it's like, oh man, when I play it back, like, well, that was said a lot of good things there. And this time around, not only that I have questions like that I wrote down that I want to ask you, but I also want to take some notes because there's a lot of things that you're going to be able to share with us and our viewers. So one of the things was, especially when it came to this property, right? So you spoke about starting a business. Now, most people, did you have the funding? Did you allocate some of that funding from the Airbnb and the other properties and then decided to open this up, or did you go ahead and get like a business loan? Because I remember, before you answer, I remember you shared with me that some banks are not giving out business loans, but then there are a few based off the percentage of earnings or based off of whatever criteria there is, that they're willing to give you a business loan, but you have to go search for it. So you want to elaborate on that?
So yes, I can elaborate on that. In regards to the financing, when I bought my last property, that was completely by myself, I took out a line of credit on my first home. From that line of credit, I was able to invest in this project, and I also had sold that home as well. The last property that I purchased. So I had money to invest in the business, but we also saw that as, because I'm the numbers guy in the business, so, I told my team that this is not going to be enough to sustain us going forward.
Right.
We needed to try and see if we can get a loan. And at the time, there were credit unions that were giving out loans for, new businesses, startups. But what they did is they tacked on SBA onto the loan in order to back it. And it's just like, in a sense, like Fannie and Freddie Mae, in a sense that it's government guaranteed, and if we defaulted, the bank would still be able to get their money. A bank did give us it. The terms were reasonable. The collateral you have to put up is rough, because if you don't have properties to say, all right, well, if I didn't pay this back, you could take this, or you could, that was the biggest challenge, is saying, putting up your house and saying, if we don't perform and we don't pay back the loan, they're going to take a house that's probably appreciated well beyond what that you took from what that loan is. So yes, I took money, invested in the business, went to the banks. I went to the bank, got the financing to continue the project, to buy our appliances, to buy our furniture, all this furniture that you see here, TVs, equipment. Right. It financed that.
Yeah. And what's the budget on that? What would you say, like because it depends on spacing, right? And how many seatings that you have to require based off the capacity that it can hold.
Well, in New York City, depending on when we air this, the rules change all the time. In order to not have to deal with much fire regulations, you have to be seated about 70 or so people. Once you have that, once your number is at that, now you have to figure out your spacing. Because with the architect, they sit down with you and they go over how much spacing is needed between the tables. So, okay, what size tables? So once your architect figures out your spacing, then you figure out everything else. You could have an idea of how many tables you want, but if it doesn't pass code or what the architect is going to send to the city, then it's not gonna fly. No matter what kind of vision you have to be like married to your architect, like you're married to your accountant, right. In order to get this project to go forward.
And I've heard that like the real process during the whole time, even with the concession and the build out, that the real time is spent dealing with the architect.
Yes, a lot of time is spent. A plus for me is I understand construction. I've been involved with apartment renovations, house renovations ever since I was about 16. So I mean 16, I would say 12 years old, sixth, seventh grade, because my family had renovated apartments. I used to paint. I used to get paid like $20 a weekend to do like 2 days of work, carrying sheetrock, all kind of crazy stuff. But I learned those soft skills helped me develop into the person who I am today, where I'm able to understand certain things and understand where you could cut corners and say, well, we don't need that. Like, why sheetrock this wall and this is a naturally brick wall? Expose it. Put some polyurethane. You probably saved yourself a few $100s from putting sheetrock on it. There's certain things that you don't need to be aesthetically pleasing to a certain look, because there's always a look for something. You see on Instagram all the time where people do something like, oh, that's beautiful, and it was an old cabinet that all they did was sand it down, threw some paint on it, and then boom, they sold it for double what it was worth or triple what it was worth. Just everyone finds value in certain things, and you have to find cutting corners. Is there value in the way you're cutting the corner?
Is what works for you.
Yes,
that's what it is. We touched on the collateral part. Now let's say I'm going in for a business loan and I don't want to be the guarantor. Is there another way for me to still get that loan, or would I still have to be the guarantor?
Well, every situation is going to be different. It matters on your credit. It matters on how much your personal financial statement. So everyone is different. So if you have a great job, then that may offset at not having the properties or collateral. They may say, all right, you make $150,000 a year. Your credit to debt income, the ratio is maybe 20%. You could afford paying this $2,000 a month payment because you make enough money, or your household makes enough money. And then it's just like getting an apartment. You need to, if everyone on the loan doesn't have the necessary assets, then maybe you need to find a guarantor that has the necessary assets or has the income that can go partner with you on it.
Right. You touched on something else. It's like getting a partner to go along with it, right? Or getting somebody to back you up in a sense. So if you don't have that, if you don't have a great credit, and you don't want to be the guarantor on there, right? On the business loan or the business to establish the business credit. Let's say you have a partner, right? They're going to pull the partner's credit. Whoever has the highest credit, of course, they're going to pull that one first. So it's kind of hard not being part of the loan if, let's say that person has a better credit than you do.
Yes. It also matters on your percentage of ownership. So if somebody has 20% ownership, depending on some banks, depends on it. If they have 20% ownership, they have to be on a loan. If they have a little bit less than 20, most of the time, or less than 10, they don't have to go on the loan. They don't consider them as like a majority stakeholder or a stakeholder that needs to be a part of the loan. So say you brought the idea to the business, and with that particular bank, when you structure your LLC or your corporation, structure where you're right below that threshold where you can't cover the loan, where there's not a question of I need to be on, but you have just enough skin in the game that you feel as though you're a stakeholder in the situation.
Right, because having bad credit could still hurt that person.
Yes, it can.
You can always add, when it comes to properties, for example, you can always add the person on as a deed member. Right? You can add them to the deed and they still have ownership of the property, even though they're not on the loan.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Even though they're not on the loan issue. Right. So that's one of the things that people are not aware of how can I still own a piece of this property even though I'm not on the actual loan. And that's one of the key ways that you can do it. You can actually add yourself into the deed. So the next thing I want to say is like, and I wrote all these down specifically for you, right? Now you operate your operation and property manager. Within that, can you break down what exactly does managing a property does? The person, what do they actually do?
A property manager is going to be a therapist. It's going to be a therapist because people are going to, tenants, workers are going to bring you their day-to-day, their problems, what they're going through. And that's going to affect, how they, what work they want to get done in their apartment or if they're going to be able to pay their rent. So you have to be open to listening to people, venting about their kids or saying how they lost their job or they, just came back from a funeral. And that's going to affect, that relationship is going to affect how to go about dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. Because at the end of the day, you want them to have a great living experience, but you also want them to be able to afford that living experience because that's what pays you and that's what pays the bills. So it's definitely a challenging job, and not many people could do it. Only because I've seen over the years people take that baggage home with them, where they're stressed out. The bills not being paid. Say the tenant slammed the door in their face. They got spit on. It takes a special kind of person to deal with that day to day. In regards to that.
Can you tie that in with Airbnb, like being a property manager for Airbnb?
So Airbnb, same kind of situation. You're not a therapist in a sense that you have to think about all the ways that people can mess up your Airbnb, right? Or they would find fault in your Airbnb because you have this one impression to get it right, or the review is you're not gonna be a super host anymore.
Right.
So you have to make sure that the coffee's on point. You got the right coffee. You got milk. You got eggs. You got the pans. You got to make sure everything is clean, because some people come in Airbnb, they look through everything. It's like, oh, there was some dust on the top of the cabinet. What are you doing on the top of the cabinet? You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen crazy reviews like, oh, well, the bathroom had I remember one person said like the bathroom had a streak on the mirror. Right. I was like, streak on the mirror. Like, did someone use a shower? Maybe that's why they was. Maybe they put their hand. Like, all kinds of things. Like, so you deal with, I think, a lot more with Airbnb, because you're dealing with a lot of different people at any given time. So you could be dealing with very tidy people. You could be dealing with people that had an Airbnb before. So it's just like, what are you doing now? So you have to be open to expecting anything from happening.
Now, let's say I want to hire a property manager. What should I be looking for?
You want to make sure that your property manager understands that their time is not their time, is not their own. That it's going to be the property. When that call comes in at 1 o'clock in the morning, they have to be able to answer it. It doesn't matter if their baby is sleeping right next to them. They gotta answer the call, because you don't know what situation, if it's life or death situation, someone's trying to get into there, someone's dying, you just don't know. Even if, say, the property manager goes on vacation, they should be informing you and letting you know. Those are the kind of things that they should say, like, hey, if I go on vacation, I'll give you 3 weeks notice, or I'll be reachable through these methods. They already should be able to address all the problems that you would face being the owner, and that you have concerns about, saying like, yeah, okay, they address that, okay, they address that, okay. They already have a list of all the people I contact, plumbers, electricians, at any given time. It shouldn't be, I got to look in the yellow pages. Well, I sound old when I say that, right? But I have to go Google and look for it. They should already have that jotted down, all those things based on your property criteria, because everyone's property criteria is different. If your property is fully electric, you don't need a plumber that does gas or oil. You need an electrician, a plumber, and maybe an HVAC guy. But if you say your property didn't have HVAC, you don't need an HVAC guy. So they should have an idea, like, based on your property, this. They should be able to do a walkthrough of your entire property and say, this is what I can do for you.
And how would they manage the collection of the money? How would they? Is that something you do, or do you put it in?
It depends. The Airbnb, the money doesn't pass through the property manager's hands. It passes through online. So that the property manager would have no control of that, unless you're dealing with personal rentals that they're doing. Like, so I would do like certain personal rentals with someone say, hey, I want to rent your place, and it would be outside of Airbnb. Say they rented it before and they said, I don't want to pay Airbnb the rate, but I want to stay there for a month. I want to pay you $1,000. You could. There's ways to incorporate technology where you don't even have to have the property manager involved. Like, I run all my businesses through QuickBooks Online, and I send them links. Send out a link. There's no having to hand-to-hand transactions needed. Technology has helped us. Technology has helped us limit the hand-to-hand transactions, right. But it's also made it better for managing something remotely. Right, so it's guaranteed things be easier for you. Like, I'm a big end user of a lot of different items. Yeah, so technology is what's giving us the ability where you don't have to do the hand to hand. You don't have to get involved. Like, even with some of my tenants in Pennsylvania, they have bank account number, deposit or rent. They can't say it's late if you deposit it on a late day. Like, oh, you know it's late because I know when you deposited it.
Yeah.
So if you got a late fee, it's because you deposited on a late day. And then, like with QuickBooks now, it applies late fees. So it's like, all right, well, you've seen in the lease when the late fees are. You know, I give you a grace the first a couple times, but after that, late fees are hitting. You know, I had one tenant that every month they were late. In about a year, they probably paid about maybe a quarter of a year's rent in late fees. I'm just like, what's the problem? What's going on? And they would reason me like, all right, well, I'll waive the late fees because I'm understandable. I don't. My premise as a landlord is not to rotate out people out of my place. It is to have long-standing tenants and to make sure that you are happy and comfortable in the space that you want to live. And it's a symbiotic relationship, and it should be treated as such, where you're giving the best support, just like in Airbnb. It's a symbiotic relationship. If that person is not happy in your Airbnb, you need to give them back their money. No matter how pressed you are for that money, you need to give them back their money, or you need to refund them in some way. That relationship goes a long way, whether it be a review or just your character. I could sleep at night and say I didn't screw anybody over.
I'll give you a prime example because we had an issue with one of our Airbnb. It was a piping issue. And it was something that we were not familiar with. And the person came in and there was no hot water. And we didn't know what was going on. We called the vendors out, which is the plumber. The plumber came to realize the way the piping system was installed incorrectly. So we had to pull that out. It cost us a lot more than we had the people in there. Right? It cost about $1,500 for that way we could do the repairs and have the piping system done correctly. Yes, they cut corners, and we understand why they cut corners because they probably was trying to save. But at the same token, by us taking over, we fell into that. So now we had to get the plumbers out, fix it correctly, but then we turned around and we refunded the whole thing because it's unfair to that person. They took time out, right, from whatever activities they had going on. Because when people don't realize it, when someone books your place or even rents your place for that short period of time, they're still traveling, and they have travel plans. They have plans to sightsee. They have plans to do certain activities. And by you not fulfilling your end of the agreement, which is having a facility that is functional and working, then they just missed out on a vacation or whatever they had planned, and they got to reroute and change everything around. So I agree with you. The best thing is to do when that happens is to refund the person and then sleep comfortably. And it doesn't matter how much you lose out on, but you gain more in character and you gain more in possibly a good review. Because we had a situation similar where we did an Airbnb and things didn't work out, and the person in return refunded us the whole day and actually allowed us to stay an extra day. So when you see that turnaround, you do it for one, the other person do it for you. It's like that effect. Yeah. But it really helps out, and it's true to what you're saying, true to your testimony. It's a good thing to just be a stand-up person. So I definitely like that. Now let's transition back to the bar, right? Now, what is the potential growth of this establishment? How do you think it can scale? Because you're familiar with one thing, right? And we talk about analytics, about knowing your numbers. When you did your numbers, what are your projection? What is the growth that you think or the potential this establishment can do or make?
Best case scenarios was that this business, as small as it is, could gross, before you pay any bill, let's put that out there, before you pay any bills, before you $1 is moved over on the accounting line, because I took some accounting. It has the potential to gross between $3 to $4 million before you potential. How you get there? Yearly.
Okay.
How you get there? It's another story altogether.
Right.
So really, that's not going to be an easy road to get.
How did you come up with that number based off your analytics?
I got that number off of a lot of, like I explained to you before, utilizing public resources like the public library. They have a business part of the library that you're able to go to Statistica and you're able to get different demographics of the household income of the local area, how often they go and eat out, what's the average spend. Those numbers is what brought me to that possibility, because the average date, it's between about $100 to $150, based on how many seats you have and your rotation time of 90 minutes a table. You roughly could see maybe anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 in a day, depending on how many hours you're open and depending on how many hours you're open and your specials. Like brunch. People love brunch. Mm-hmm. If you conduct brunch in the proper fashion, you are able to pull down a few $1,000s in a couple hours just by offering, champagne bottles. It's not champagne though, but but a champagne bottomless brunch. It's very profitable for some businesses depending on what kind of champagne they get. There are champagne bottles that cost $6, and they're selling that same bottle for $150. So that markup is crazy. Mm. So from the city, when people had the mega bottles, those mega bottles make cost $20 to $25 and or $50, and they're charging $150, $200. So that markup is what gets people to those higher numbers, when you could say like, oh, they did $3 million in a year. Wow, how did they do that? Because they're doing a lot of markup.
Right.
Or they're doing a lot of people are doing city contracts that people are unaware of. Businesses like this could do food for school lunches. They could do catering events, off-site locations. If a lot of restaurants open from bars and restaurants open from 5 to about 2, 3 in the morning, because New York can go till 4 depending on your area or your location, if you're in a commercial zone or not. Between the hours of 9 a.m. to when you open at 5 p.m., you could probably do city lunches. You could bring in the kitchen staff and maybe produce anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 worth of food that would just go out in trays that would feed people for catering events, schools, PTAs, corporate events. That's like the untold truth of offsetting a business where you're pivoting and you're multi-stream within the business. Mm-hmm. And most people think that it's the day-to-day transaction that gives the business its money, but it's not. Mm-hmm. It's really those extra streams of income that people don't really look about or even understand that businesses are doing. Like throughout the pandemic, some businesses stayed alive because they were giving out lunches to the hospitals. They were contracted to do that. Not everyone, they gave away free meals. Some people probably gave away free meals, yes. Mm-hmm. But not everybody. Some people got contracted thousands of dollars to give out those free meals. Mm-hmm. They didn't do it. You can't give out something free for a long period of time without being compensated. Food is more expensive now than it was during the pandemic. Yeah, but even then, you're talking about giving out 1,000 meals a day or 1,000 meals a week. That cost that you're talking about, that might cost maybe $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. Who's offsetting that line item? Because your accountant's gonna look at you like you're crazy. Like you gave away what? How did you offset it? Right. And most of the time, a lot of people got contracted to do it. So people don't realize that you could do business with the government, you could do business with the city, the state, and those could offset certain things in your business that you won't have to think about. You just kind of work hard, make the relationships, find the contracts, fulfill the contracts, and go to the next one. And that kind of puts your business on like cruise control, where you could say, all right, well, we're locked in at say $10,000 a month because those contracts are coming in, and you could work on everything else where you're saying, all right, well, since that's locked in, then now we are able to say our expenses are, we have to cover a $20,000 threshold. Mm-hmm. $10,000 coming from the contracts. All right, we need to cover another $10,000 in sales to make that make sense. So that's what that's one of the things that led me to my numbers, to figure out city contracts and figure out how to pivot the business and doing outside catering that people want every day. There's people that rent event halls and they just want somebody to make the food for them, because as we get older, as time goes by, people are straying away from the times when, the big cookout is being done by your grandmother, your mother. They don't want to do that. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to do that. They're not slaving behind the kitchen anymore. As my girl would say, we're out of the kitchen. We in the boardroom now. Like we ain't you go back there. Okay, if you want that food, you better go warm it up.
And it's also convenience too, because if I can gather the people, focus on one thing, and don't have to worry about the food, it just makes the process seamless. It's like, all right, they got this, let me just take care of that in 1, 2, 3.
And the suckiest part is cleanup.
Cleanup, yeah.
Nobody wants cleanup. It's like I have friends who's just like, oh, they have a house party. I'm like, okay, great. And I'm already like, all right, so the house party is supposed to end at 10. We need to get out of here by 9 because they're gonna rope me in for the cleanup. Let me get out of here.
So you had a game plan.
Yeah, you gotta. Through business, any business you start, at the same time you're having an entry strategy, you need to have an exit strategy.
Absolutely.
You need a mirror. It needs to happen like entry, exit. It needs to be right next to each other, because you cannot go into any business without having an exit. And your exit is just as important as your entry. And a lot of people don't realize that. They just think I'm just gonna get into it. And it's like, but what about your exit? You built this corporation and made this cup. If someone gave you $1 billion for it, you're not going to say, well, I never thought about that. You need to think about that as you start your business or as you start to scale. Because those kind of situations come where you made something that someone else couldn't. People buy that. That's a gem that people say they see value in its further growth. Like the person who made this kind of cup, they may say, like, this is going to work for bars and restaurants. Let me buy that idea from you, and then let's go for it. But you didn't realize how to scale it.
Yeah, that's true too. But some people, it's a double-edged sword, because you have, from one end, for what you just explained, is that you may have someone that's the creator and have the idea, and they have the exit plan ready to sell just in case. Like I had Al Amin, he created Pavement, and he thought in about 2 years, when let's say Walmart comes in, he was going to be bought out, right? And he had the game plan in mind. There's some people that have the exit plan and are ready to have an exit process and say, all right, if it grows to this much and I can accumulate about this, I'm willing to sell at this number. Because some people have their numbers already in their head, right? But then there are other people that say, you know what, I can actually grow this to become a Walmart where I could pass it down generation to generation to generation. So you have to have an exit plan just in case, because you have to understand your product and your business model. Is it your business model and your product is the type that's scalable, where it could go to generations, or is it something that is probably going to be good for about a decade or two, right? I'm not saying to sell yourself short, but you have to be realistic on the type of product that you're selling. How long can you do it with the right team? Can you expand it? But there's a cap growth to say, okay, with this type of business, this is probably the level I can see it going. I'm not saying it can't go further, but that's what you're seeing, and you're willing to say, all right, if somebody come out with this number, I'm ready to sell. But then there are those that say, no, this has a potential growth to have generational wealth. Like the next generation, the generation after that can hold on to it. Like my sons and their grandchildren, things like that can actually run this company. So there's two frame of thoughts here, and it depends on your paradigm, like which one you're looking at. And I agree, you have to have an exit plan, but you also have to have your exit plan based off the business model that you have and the type of product that you have. But if it's something that you feel that it can be like an Amazon,
of course. I mean, yeah, you're right. Your cost-benefit analysis has to be on point, and it's going to constantly change. It's definitely something I think about all the time. I think about it.
You're like excellent when it comes to like numbers. So you have a basic framework, all right, of what it is, what the expectation should be.
No, I'm not excellent, but I try to keep myself updated with the numbers and how it should be. And there's always I always second guess myself sometimes when I'm thinking like either this can't be this good or it can't be this bad. So even though you have the numbers, you really just have to constantly tweak it, constantly figure out, okay, well, all right, this benefit is going to outweigh this, but how does it work? How does it affect us? How does it change the numbers? Is it going to do for us? Should we increase marketing? When we did increase marketing, how did it affect our sales that month? There's so many different levers that you could pull, but it's like what affected what directly.
Right.
So,
and can one person manage that?
No. No. One person can't manage that, and just like we had conversations before about, like at the restaurant are you on the floor or are you in the office? You can't be in both. Yeah. The person that's in the office has to have some hands down on the floor to feel the temperature, to know what people like, what they didn't like. Yeah. You have to have the finger on the pulse. If you don't have a finger on the pulse, there's going to be a disconnection. And people that are on the floor and people in the office are going to have a disconnect, because someone's going to always think that someone is not pulling their weight. Because even in property management, the people that's in the office, same with people compared to people in the field, there's always a disconnect. Like, oh well, you're not in the field shoveling snow and stuff, but you don't understand what I'm dealing with here, and vice versa. But the person in the office could be just as stressed, trying to deal with 100 different calls every minute and can't use a bathroom. You know what I'm saying? While the person in the field uses the bathroom whenever they feel like it. This person can't, because the calls are coming in. Oh, you didn't pick up the phone. Oh, you didn't, cursing. And still able to do your job. Both have challenging positions, but both cannot reason with each other's qualms on their day-to-day transaction with people. So once you hold both, positions, you're able to have a better understanding. Like, oh, all right, well, you go through that, so I understand, and it is what it is. Like, oh, I came in there, and you're maybe watching a movie, or you're maybe sitting down taking a nap, because you probably had a hectic morning, or you're in the bathroom for 2 hours because, you couldn't use the bathroom at all day, or you probably ate something bad. It happens.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I went to an entrepreneurship seminar, and I forgot to get the guy's name, but he really, slipped my mind actually. But he stated something that added value to me. What he shared was the person on the field. Okay, the admin person can go in the field, but the field person can never go into the admin. And the reason he broke it down is that's how important the admin piece is. Because if that person that wants to leave the admin role and wants to go out into the field and work on the field, they can do that. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for a field person to go in and try to fill the slot of an admin person, because the admin has to answer calls, follow up with emails, and do all these other valuable things, right? That we being on the field may not pay attention to, right?
Yeah, like simple writing.
Simple writing, or looking for grants, or looking for properties and things like that. So it's easier to funnel through this way from admin to field than it is from funneling it from the field into the admin.
Yeah, I never thought about that, because when I first started, I was doing construction with the family in the field, but not in the field as much as when I first got hired by my cousins to do doing office work, pushing papers, filing papers, taking rents, depositing them, and that's what I did for about 6 months, and I had just graduated high school, and I was doing that. And then I eventually upgraded to going out in the field. And when I understood the office stuff and I was in the field, it was just like, okay, you're XYZ tenant, okay, and I already know, like, you owe XYZ, okay, this is what, okay, like, things start to like light up, where it's like, all right, well, now I understand why we did this, or why you're in court, or vice versa. Like, cool.
That's what he said. You can go from admin to the field, but the field can never go into admin.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things to learn in the office.
Because who's going to do the process of the loans or the process of all these things that are going on?
Yeah.
So you have to have somebody that knows it and knows how to manage it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, also, I tell a lot of people, you know, from the lawyer to the accountant to the advisors, everyone's not nice. You know, they tell you like they're more type A than anything else. They tell you what it is. Like, this is what you have to do. There's no
very straightforward. There's no transparency.
And a lot of people don't appreciate the straightforwardness. But it's like, okay, well, if you deal with the accountant, you're going to tell the accountant going to tell you just like it is. He's not going to be like, oh well, you could do this, but no, there's going to be, you don't do this and you're going to end up in jail. You don't do this, you're going to get fined.
You touched on the lawyer. Let's go back a second. Now, so when you got the liquor license,
Okay.
all right, what did you have to go through? I'm pretty sure you have to get a lawyer, and you have to get a lawyer that's familiar with the process.
We asked around. We got a lawyer that's been in the business for about, I would say, 10, 20 years. We went to his office, said what we want to do, gave the address. He already had an idea where we were. He gave us, you know, full checklist on do's and don'ts and how to get
like zoning and
zoning,
like that.
all of that. He explained everything in complete detail. I think even more detail than most lawyers that I've encountered all my years of doing anything. So he was able, you know, but he's doing it so long. So he's just running it down this mile a minute. And he's just like, okay, did I get all that? And then like, don't worry, the secretary has it all in the list. All right, cool. Pay them their money. You look at the bill, you're like, wow, they get paid that much? I need to go back to school. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But, you know, you see where it's being spent, because at every step of the road, I didn't have a doubt that we would get the license, because they had an answer for every time.
They had a roadmap. Basically knew what it is.
And we listened to the team. They were just like, you're really good at following the directions. Like, yeah, because I don't need this to mess up.
Right. So now, what would you recommend? Would you recommend speaking with a lawyer first, or do you recommend getting an architect involved first? Like,
so you're going to need the architect. The architect should be your first stop, because in the process of getting the liquor license, you're going to need floor plans. You're going to need, and that's what the lawyer is going to need. But if you have that, or you have some general idea of what the place is going to look like and how it's set up, it makes it easier for the liquor lawyer to be like, okay, well, now I can submit this with this person. I can submit that. It's a lot easier to go apart, because it's a part of the whole process. Pictures, floor plans, what's DOB certified, what's not DOB certified.
And with the architect, with the lawyer, based off the architectural blueprint, are they able to tell you if that's coded or not? Like, will the architect be able to put it in within the blueprint? If this property needs to be up to code, will they know?
Yeah, the architect will know. The architect will know what would fly in terms of emergency services and what's needed, because the liquor license and all that stuff like that, they're not going to supersede DOB, because DOB is going to want it a particular way, and they're not going to say, well, you know, DOB wants it this way, but the SLA, the liquor authority, wants it another way. They're not going to supersede them, because they know that's not their purview. So you'll eventually find out that certain purviews, people don't venture out in a different lane at all. They're not going to say, oh, well, you're supposed to be, or it passed DOB certification. All right, cool.
Yeah, that's
we're happy, because DOB talks to people in terms of like occupancy and how that works, because they revert to them. Like, all right, well, DOB says your occupancy is 72. All right, well, 72 is what it is, you know?
Okay, good. Hey, man, it's been a pleasure. I think you answered most of my questions, but I know there's some questions in the back that people would like to ask you, so let's get into that. But thank you for answering most of my questions. And I just think of certain things that I know the viewers would probably want to know, because that's something I would want to know. And I'm glad that you were able to educate me on it, and to gain some knowledge on, you know, what steps to do if I ever do decide to pursue in that career or that industry. So I just want to say I appreciate that. But there was a question that you had. What was it?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the Airbnb that you purchased the condo, and you rented it out as an Airbnb and found out that you couldn't rent it out for anyone that was less than 30 days. So they had to revamp the whole idea of you doing your Airbnb. Just curious, because I do know that production teams, even though it's just one apartment, production teams, if they're doing long-term production in the area, they do look for long-term living for 3 months, 6 months, 3 months, and so on. Could you have done that and started that kind of industry?
Yeah, I probably could have done that because now I would tell the production team, hey, your lease is for 6 months, 12 months, but it might end earlier, and I would tell them, like, put another clause in it that say you could cancel that early, because most of these condo associations, they're looking for the first page or two. They're not going to go through every single part of that the contract. Not saying you're lying to them, but you're giving a little wiggle room for them to change, because things change. Like, look at what happened at that film shoot the other day where the lady got shot. No one saw that happening, but you have to have act of God kind of clause, in the sense that you could still walk away, God forbid something did happen that was uncontrollable.
You had a question? All right. So,
you have a question? Shauna, you have a question?
Okay, so that's good. Listen, this has been amazing. One final thing I want to share. Oh, I want to ask you actually.
On a scale, I'm a realist. I still from 1 to 10. But I have a person that, I have a lot of businesses. I started Airbnb, started this by myself. From 1 to 10. What's the scale of it? All the unforeseen COVID coming up, another COVID happening, what's that coming up? How hard it would be to start a business like this?
Like this, or the Airbnb, or any business?
Bar business. Because my friend wanted to start a restaurant business. When to start, how hard would it be? He says location. It can't only be location.
So I would say with us, like here, there were a lot of empty storefronts here in Bed-Stuy, Fulton area. The reason why this particular location worked for us, because it was already the certificate of occupancy had eating and drinking on the first and second floor, which made it we would have more seating than most of the other competitors in the local area, and be paying way less rent than they are. So it really depends on your numbers. COVID has made it harder for people to open up, but not saying you can't get it done. There's so many grants and programs that's willing to fund you, like even the local Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, they're giving grants to help people out. Queens Chamber of Commerce, they're partnering with grants to help people out. If you want to start a real estate company, there's grants to purchase your first property. It's just a mountain of paperwork. You just have to find the people that know what they're doing and sift through. You're gonna find people that don't know what they're doing and still get paid for not doing nothing. But there are people that have success stories and saying, hey, pay them a couple $100, $1,000, and they'll grant write for you. They would find the necessary paperwork needed. So I would say is to figure out what business you wanna put together, like your friend. Write it down on paper, flush through all the ideas, the competition, the pricing, all that stuff, and then get it over to a business specialist, in a sense, to figure out who do you need to go to. Are you going to the bank? Are you going to SBA? Are you going to private lenders? And then go from there. Or are you self-funding? And if you are self-funding, what could you afford? Yes, location. But can you partner with another restaurant or another person that wants to the restaurant and share a space where maybe their restaurant's from 8 a.m. to 4 and yours is from 4 to 8 or 4 to 11? There's ways to do that. Like there's a lot, like just how there's co-working spaces, there can be business spaces. You just have to. It's not a industry standard until you make it, and then you pretty much write your own ticket.
Before, go ahead.
So they say because.
Do me a favor, just talking to that mic right there.
I watch the bar rescue, and it says per table, per seat costs this much money, this seat is this much money, this table. Is it changed quickly? Is this restaurant here at this location is $125 per seat per section, and one across the street is different, right? But the houses are where that house is $700,000, and therefore that house is.
Yeah, so up here on this floor, we had we had we're supposed to have 10 tables, right? Before COVID, we had only about 6 tables. As you know, vaccinated laws change, and now the rules have changed. As you increase the tables, you're going to eventually fill to occupancy and get to those numbers. So yeah, across the street is 125. Here's 125. You just have to make sure that you have to find a way to get those tables filled. Just because the table's there doesn't mean that you're going to guarantee to make that, but you have to give yourself the ability to have the potential of making. It's just like reading a book and never utilizing the skills that the book gave you.
I always ask this too, is turnout. Can we do you can't 20% you got on a seat? Or can you do that?
So in most instances, a lot of restaurants I've seen, they'll have a displayed on the table, 90 minutes, you have to get up. How we pretty much do it is, unless it's busy, we really don't push you. We don't really ask for you that you've reached your time, only because it doesn't make sense to like move you if we don't have another person. But if we had like reservation service, then yeah, you have to move for the next reservation. But
I've been at other restaurants where they tell you in advance, hey, unfortunately I got a reservation during this time, so you only have between an hour, is that okay? Or maybe 30 minutes to 40 minutes, is that okay? And 9 out of 10 times we always say yes, because we understand that, all right, there's a reservation coming in, let's just get our food, and if we do decide to stay, we can get our drinks or something and mingle.
And that's what we try to offer that as much, like, okay, your table of 2, we can put you by the bar, we can figure out some way. It's always, the customer's always right, but you have to figure out a happy medium between them being right and still want to patronize your business, and you trying to figure out how best to accommodate.
Right. And the other good thing about it is that I've been places where they drop the receipt or they drop the check and they say, take your time. But normally when that check comes, all right, it's time to go, right? And it's not until and you may want something else, but then after the check comes, you may request something else. But that check, when it comes on the table and they always say, take your time, to me, that's the kind of like in the window here, like, okay, it's time for
last lap.
Yeah, last lap, yeah, exactly. But just before, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, but I just wanted to know too, the extension outside on the streets. We talked about that. You were saying how in the city they were pricing it at a certain number, and then now because of COVID, they're allowing people the opportunity to keep it. What was the numbers in the city, and what's the reason why? I mean, what's the reason behind not just the COVID? What's the reason behind them allowing you not to pay for the extension?
So, how I understood the numbers before was because most of these outdoor dinings before were really small, like really, really small. They would cost anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 because you needed to have an architect, you needed to get DOB certified. It was a big, long process that some people took, and it didn't make sense for some places but some people did do it. COVID has caused where people couldn't go inside. Remember those first 3-4 months, couldn't go inside, so outdoor dining made sense. To take that away from businesses that still don't have a functioning inside would dramatically reduce that business's output overnight, because now they're converting the inside to be takeout only. Just push it, like more tabletop warmers, more prepping to get the food in the bag and getting it out. Where they didn't have to experience that before. Like, our first floor was designed to be about 34 people on that first floor. Tables and chairs everywhere, seats everywhere. But we have about a quarter of that floor designated for just takeout, because it doesn't make sense to have seating there and we still have to do more takeout sometimes than seating inside. Like the bags, so you have plastic bags, the forks, the spoons, the warmer boxes. It's not something that was factored into the business plan when we first started, because if it was, we would have changed some things, we would have made the kitchen a little different. But as COVID has brought us a new, it put us on our back heel where now we have to pivot, we have to change direction. Not saying that this change will go back to what it used to be, but this might be the new norm, where every kitchen has to be prepared to have an extra part just for takeout, or takeout prepping area in the new business plan, as your friend might want to do. Is like, that's a guarantee. Maybe you need to have a takeout window. So if they ever did shut things down again, he can still operate, and he can just not have to open up his door, but he has a little window. There's a business a couple doors down. That's what they did. They added a little takeout window just in case. They just have to just open the window, give you food. You know, it's just like a corner store. The corner store designed the little drive-through window. You know, at late at night, they were afraid of being robbed or vandalized and stuff. So they made a little takeout window. They still made money. Hey, I want sour power. I want this. I want that. You can still get it late night. It's just you're not going to be sitting around in the store, walking around and doing anything wrong.
In Astoria, they have the strip over in Ditmars Avenue, and all the windows were, I don't know if it was designed after COVID or maybe it was there and we just didn't pay attention to it, but now they have this open window policy where you can just walk up and just place the order there, get your drinks, and then go. Now, it could have been something that was invented after COVID, but that process alone is a lot feasible for you to just walk up. If I'm outside, and of course it has to be a nice day, but if I'm outside and I don't want to go inside and I just want to purchase a drink and stand out, then it's a lot easier for me than having to go outside. And I'm pretty sure it's more conducive to those that don't have their vaccinations and they don't have to go inside. They could just stay outside and then order their drinks.
Yeah, most definitely. New York really had to take a lot of ideas and rules from other places, because, you know, when you go to like Miami and certain things, or you go to Vegas, you could walk with the drink on the strip and certain things like that. People ordering through windows. It's just the rules have been so strict here in New York and certain parts of the country that that's what it was for the last 30, 40 years. So this disease has flipped every industry on its head, where they have to rethink everything, because it's more of okay, we want to keep people safe. We don't want loitering. We don't want public indecency. Like you want to shy away from it. But how do we keep businesses intact? Because without the businesses, you have it's a broken windows theory. You'll have businesses boarded up, areas looking deplorable, and that's not going to help. Anything will be worse than public indecency. It'll be like, okay, well, now we starved this business on this strip. This strip is now dead. Now there are zombies, or people that take other people that they didn't want in that space have taken over that area, and it's a cause and effect for everything.
Yeah. Do you think we're gonna go back?
I don't think. I would say in about 5 to 10 years, we start to go back in that direction. But
I'm not talking about as far as New York City being to its potential. I'm referring to more as New York City reverting back to its no drinking policy on the streets and no, outdoor hangouts.
I think the numbers is what's going to affect New York's future. What they're gonna take all the numbers of public indecency, drunkenness, pissing on the street, lewdness. They're gonna take that into consideration, 301 complaints, 911 complaints, and they're gonna say, well, what transpired during this time? And someone could make the argument that this should stay or this should revert back, and those are what's gonna drive policy, because the numbers is what really drive policy. And someone could argue, well, they didn't do anything. No one got locked up. No one did. So why stop it now? And then, like I said, cause and effect. Where if you do something else, you might affect something from happening or business from doing something.
That's correct. I think. Final question. Listen, if you had to, this is the final one. If you had to give an honest feedback to someone that's coming up and trying to establish themselves as a serial entrepreneur, like what would be a good advice to share that's for somebody that's aspiring to be someone like you?
That's a tough one. What advice I would give? I mean, you have to wake up every day knowing that you're going to accomplish your goals. You have to say, okay, wake up and start your day and figure out, what the challenges you're going to be dealing with today and how to get past those goals. Get past those challenges, because that's what's going to get you to the next level. Always carry yourself with respect and treat others with respect. and try to be as professional as possible. Even if you're late to the meeting, try to make or try to figure out, okay, why was I late? All right, I was late because I got on the bus late, or I took a shower late, or I didn't brush my teeth, or I didn't make up my clothes in time, or I didn't iron the night before. Do the things to improve day by day. You don't have to make drastic changes to be successful. You just have to make just a little change day by day. It will build up into something bigger and bigger. You just have to trust the process of that chipping away. Because when you trust the process, it's going to pay off. It's just like when people, first started and they were getting pensions. They got in at 18 and it was like 20 and out. They saved up a lot. They went into work every day. They collected the pension. When they were able to, when 20 years after that, they're 38, they could retire, but they're not at a retirement age. They could go and get another job and get another pension, and boom, put another 20 and out or 25 and out. Now they're 48, 50, and they still can't retire again. They go back and work. So I would say just constantly try to improve yourself day by day, and it will pay off for itself. Same thing with the credit. You figure out a way to pay their bill as much as possible, not the minimum amount, but just pay it more and more. Maybe don't go to the club that weekend. Maybe you might forego, giving yourself a Christmas present. Or buying Christmas presents to somebody, don't say not your girl, but I mean, but I'm just saying I'm just saying like you need to find certain ways to get ahead, as legal as possible, because some people will say, well, the only way I can do is illegal. No, there's legal ways of doing everything. It's just constantly chipping away, because if your credit debt is $11,000 a month and your credit card, that your bill is $200 and 90% of that $200 is going to interest, then find a way to pay $210, $215, and keep chopping away. Like, you gotta walk to work, then walk to work so you could pay more on that. It's gonna pay off, but you just gotta keep working at it, constantly working at it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's been a hectic day. We got the yelling, the screaming. Got the football games on. Hopefully they're winning. Because I'll be really upset.
Listen, where can they reach you if they need to get in contact?
You can reach me at Carpe DMD, Carpe _DM_D. You could also reach me at IB Purpose _BK. We're here at 1489 Fulton Street in Brooklyn, zip code 11216. You could get orders. You can order from us on our website. You can order from us on Uber Eats, Grubhub. You can also call 718-734-1489. And I really appreciate you coming down and taking your time out of this Saturday to give this interview, because we need to do more things like this.
Absolutely, man. I actually had an amazing time. This is off topic right now. We had such a interesting morning, and he's been so wonderful about it. And we got an opportunity to really catch up as we were setting up, and we probably talked for about an hour prior to this.
Yes.
And it was just one interesting conversation after the next, and it was just such a blessing to be able to take in a lot of that knowledge and take in a lot of the things that he experienced, and then for us to go back and forth on certain ideas that we think will probably work, and we don't know for sure, but we just try to experiment with thoughts by saying, well, it could work this way, it could work that way. But it was a pleasure being here, because we got the opportunity to really chat before we really got here, and it was about an hour conversation. I just want to say thank you for being such a good host, bringing out the amazing drinks here, and that's pretty much it. Thank you, everyone. We had an awesome time. And one final thing for Darnell, for purpose, don't forget Fulton Avenue, downtown. At least downtown Brooklyn, isn't it? That's Brooklyn. All right. Come by. Enjoy. The food is great, the drinks, the atmosphere, and thank you for tuning in.